I bought a house for me, not my sister, and my parents freaked out. I always knew. My family had a favorite, and it wasn't me. My sister Emily was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who had everything handed to her. Meanwhile, I was a backup plan, the spare, the one expected to handle things, to be responsible, to sacrifice. I played along for years, but one day I decided I was done growing up. The pattern was obvious. Emily got the newest clothes, the private tutors, the dream vacations I got, lectures about hard work and independence. At 16, I was flipping burgers at a dingy roadside diner while she was getting ready for a summer trip to Europe. When I brought it up, my parents told me I needed to understand priorities. Translation: Emily's future mattered, mine not so much. I wasn't bitter, not at first. I just assumed that's how things worked. Parents invest in the kid they think will go far, and the other one, well, he learns to fend for himself. So I did. I worked through college, lived in cramped apartments with roommates who forgot to pay rent, and skipped nights out while my classmates partied. Every paycheck I put something aside. I wasn't sure for what, just that I needed a safety net because no one was going to catch me if I fell. After graduating, I knew I had two choices: grind away in a low-paying job or take a risk. So I took my savings and opened a small auto repair shop. It wasn't glamorous, and the first year was brutal. Late nights, long hour weekends spent elbow deep in engine grease, but it paid off. By year 5, I was making steady money enough to start seriously thinking about buying my own place. Of course, my parents knew this. I had mentioned my dream of finally owning a house instead of renting a shoebox apartment, and every time I did, they'd smile, and somehow the conversation would always shift. You know, my mom would sigh dramatically. Emily's been struggling so much. Rent is so expensive these days. My dad would add, she just needs a little help. It would mean so much if she had a stable place to live. They never outright said it, but the message was loud and clear. I was supposed to be the one to fix her struggles. Never mind that. Emily's struggles were mostly self-inflicted. While I was pulling 16-hour shifts, she was out living her best life: vacations, designer handbags, nights out at expensive restaurants. But somehow she was the one who needed help. And then there was money. Over the years, I've been helping my parents financially, covering home repairs, unexpected bills, even slipping them extra cash when things got tight. I didn't mind at first. They were my parents after all. But then I started noticing little things, like how my mom always had a new handbag, or how my dad suddenly had a fancy new watch. At first, I thought maybe they had just been saving. Then I realized where the money was going. Emily, my parents weren't struggling. They were just funneling my help straight into her lifestyle. Then I overheard a Ziamikai conversation that changed everything. I had stopped by my parents' house to drop something off. I wasn't planning to stay long, but as I walked past the kitchen, I heard my name, so I did what any rational person would do. I froze in place and listened while pretending to check my phone. I'm sure he'll do the right thing. My mom was saying he's responsible. He's been saving for years. My dad agreed. It only makes sense. He can't expect her to struggle. He's her brother. Struggle. Emily, the same Emily who had never paid rent a day in her life, the one who still had my parents covering her credit card bills. Something wasn't adding up, and then it hit me. They were talking about my money. I stood there, my heart pounding as realization sank in. They had a plan where I, without ever being asked, would buy a house not for myself, for Emily, and the worst part, they assumed I'd just go along with it like it was obvious, like it was my duty. I wanted to storm in and demand answers, but I knew how that would go. They'd say I was being selfish. They talk about family, about responsibility, about how lucky I was to have made it while Emily struggled. I'd heard it all before I needed to think so. I left without saying a word that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my tiny studio apartment with a flickering kitchen light I still hadn't fixed. I thought about every time I had been told to wait my turn, every sacrifice I had made, every time I had swallowed my frustration and smiled. And I thought about Emily, about how she would react if she knew what they were planning. Would she be embarrassed, grateful, or would she just assume it was her right? I got my answer the next morning. Emily called me. Out of nowhere, her voice dripping with excitement, she went on and on about a new place she had found. It's perfect. She gushed, 3 bedrooms, a backyard. I can finally move out. I waited for her to say the part that mattered, the part where she told me she had a plan to afford it. But she didn't, because she didn't need one. In her mind, this was already settled. My parents had clearly made sure of that. She even had the audacity to mention that she'd let me crash in the guest room if I ever needed a place to stay. That was it. The moment I knew I wasn't playing along anymore. The very next day, I did exactly what they expected me to. I bought a house, just not the one they had in mind. I didn't tell anyone. No grand announcement, no explanations. I found a place I loved, put down my deposit, and signed the papers. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. At the first thing in my life that was truly mine. I thought I had time before my family found out. Maybe a few months, maybe even a year, but life has a funny way of speeding things up. I was in the middle of setting up my new kitchen, peeling off those ridiculous Live, Laugh, Love stickers the previous owner had left behind when my phone started blowing up missed calls messages. My mom, my dad, Emily, even extended relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. And then I saw the text that made my stomach drop. Why did we hear from the realtor that you bought a house? I had no idea how they found out. Maybe the agent mentioned something to someone, maybe. Emily had been looking at the same listings. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I had made my move, and now the real battle was about to begin. The moment that text popped up on my screen, I knew my peaceful housewarming phase was officially over. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, calls, messages, some angry, some concerned, all carrying the same undertone: betrayal. I ignored them. If I picked up now, I get dragged into a conversation where they twist everything into me being the bad guy. Instead, I went back to setting up my place. The previous owner had left behind some hideous wallpaper in the living room, and if I had to deal with anything stressful, today it was going to be that. Then my doorbell rang. I already knew who it was. I could feel it in my bones when I opened the door. My parents stood there, looking less like loving parents and more like corporate executives ready to discuss my breach of contract. My mom's face was a mix of disappointment and hurt, the kind of look reserved for when I used to forget to call home. My dad, he had his arms crossed like he was about to negotiate a hostile takeover before they could even step inside. I brace myself. The next 20 minutes were exactly what I expected. Accusations, guilt, tripping the whole war family speech. My mom went on about how Emily was heartbroken and didn't know where she'd live now. My dad made it clear that they were counting on me to do the right thing, and my personal favorite, the reminder that after everything they did for me, this was how I repaid them. Everything they did for me, like making me pay rent as a teenager, like expecting me to fund my own education while they paid for Emily's designer wardrobe, like letting me work 2 jobs while she got weekend spa getaways. If anything, I had repaid them 10 times over. I could feel my patience wearing thin, but instead of snapping, I stayed quiet. Just nodded along, let them talk. I had learned a long time ago that arguing didn't work. They weren't here to listen. They were here to push their narrative. Then came the ultimatum. My mom, her voice full of force, calmness, told me I had 2 choices: transfer the house to Emily or be cut off. I had to stop myself from laughing. Cut off from what? Their love and support. The same love and support that always came with conditions. The same family who had never offered me anything without expecting twice as much in return. I told them I'd think about it, not because I actually would, but because I wanted them out of my house. They left looking victorious, like they had just cornered me into submission. I took a deep breath, walked into my kitchen and grabbed a beer from the fridge, sat down, stared at my phone. More missed calls. Emily had finally texted, and I could already guess what it said: something about me ruining her life, something about how she had counted on me. I opened it, and that's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. A message from Emily, but it wasn't meant for me. She had accidentally sent it to our family group chat instead of whoever she was talking to. The message, a detailed plan about how she and my parents were going to break me, how they'd keep up the pressure until I caved and handed over the house. There it was, plain as day, confirmation that none of this was about fairness or family. It was a coordinated takedown, and I was just a fool who was supposed to roll over. I took a screenshot, saved it, and just sat there for a minute. For the first time in years, I felt something shift, not anger, not sadness, just clarity. They had never seen me as family. I was just a resource to be tapped into and needed, so I made a decision. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to explain myself. I was just going to show them exactly how done I was. The next morning, I started making my move. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. If my family wanted a battle, they were going to get one. But on my terms. I wasn't going to argue or explain myself. I was going to take control of the situation and make sure they knew I was done playing their games first. I locked everything down. I called my bank and double-checked that no one could make changes to my accounts except me. I updated my passwords, secured my important documents, and even installed security cameras around my property just in case, knowing my family, I wouldn't put it past them to pull something desperate. Then I reached out to a lawyer. I had no idea if my parents could actually cause trouble for me legally, but I wasn't about to take any chances. After explaining my situation, the lawyer reassured me that as long as everything was in my name and I hadn't signed anything for Emily, I had nothing to worry about. That was good news, but I still wasn't taking any risks. Later that day, I got a text from Emily. She was willing to talk, but only if I was ready to make things right. I ignored it. A few hours later, another text came, in this time for my mom. She was worried about me and thought we should have a family dinner to discuss everything. Yeah, right. I wasn't falling for that trap. Instead, I decided to flip the script. If my family thought they could manipulate me through pressure, I was going to apply some pressure my own first. I went on social media. I made a simple post. Nothing. Dramatic nothing directly calling them. Out just a picture of my new house with a caption, "Finally home, worked hard for this and it's all mine." The reaction was immediate friends and extended family started congratulating me, commenting on how much I deserved it, and then the real fun began. Emily didn't comment, but I knew she saw it. A few hours later, I got another text this time. She wasn't so polite, she unloaded on me about how selfish I was, how I had humiliated her by making my purchase. Public, apparently some of her friends had asked why she wasn't getting a house. If I could afford one, her ego had taken a hit and she didn't like it. Then came the phone call. This time it was my dad. No more fake concern. No more were family. Talk he was angry, said I was embarrassing them, said I was being ungrateful. I let him rant then when he finally asked what I was going to do to fix this. I gave him a simple answer. Nothing. That was when the threat started. If I didn't do the right thing, I could forget about ever being welcome in their house again. My response sounds like a win-win to me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for standing my ground. I didn't feel like I owed them anything because the truth was I didn't. I blocked Emily's number. I muted my parents' calls. Then I ordered takeout from my favorite barbecue joint, cracked open a cold beer, and sat on my new porch, watching the sun set over my hard-earned property. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. The silence didn't last long. By the next morning, my inbox was flooded with even more messages. Emily had gone full meltdown mode. My parents had started damage control, apparently. Some extended family members had seen my post and started asking questions. The last thing my parents wanted was for people outside their little circle to realize how messed up the situation really was. I could almost hear their conversations playing out. My mom frantically trying to spin the story so she didn't look bad. My dad grumbling about family duty and how I had somehow betrayed them. And Emily, well, she had gone nuclear. Not only was she ranting in the family group chat, but she was also airing her grievances on social media. I scrolled through her latest posts, long dramatic captions about how hard her life was, how she had been betrayed by those closest of her, and how she was struggling to find a place to live. I nearly choked on my coffee when I saw that she had started to GoFundMe. That's right. She had actually created a crowdfunding campaign titled "Help Emily Get the Home She Deserves." The audacity was almost impressive. The description was even better. She painted herself as the struggling sister whose cold-hearted brother had refused to help her in her time of need. She conveniently left out the part where she had been expecting a free house and had done absolutely nothing to earn it. The donations, a grand total of $20 probably from one of her equally entitled friends. I had to admit I was a little disappointed. If you're going to commit to the scam, at least make it believable. Still, the situation was getting ridiculous. I needed to shut this down before it spiraled even further. I had no interest in turning this into an online family feud, but I also wasn't about to let them drag my name through the mud, so I decided to drop one last bomb. I made a new post, but this time I included some receipts, actual screenshots of the text Emily had sent me where she openly admitted to planning with my parents to pressure me into giving her my house. I didn't add any commentary, just the screenshots and a simple caption, clearing up some misunderstandings. The internet did the rest. Within hours, people started calling her out. Friends who had blindly supported her before suddenly went silent. Some even turned on her, realizing they'd been manipulated. Emily deleted her GoFundMe and unlocked her social media accounts. My parents, they weren't handling the heat well either, apparently. Some extended family members had decided to reach out and ask why they thought it was okay to demand a house from their son while coddling their daughter. By the end of the day, the family group chat was dead silent. No more guilt-tripping messages, no more passive-aggressive calls, just silence, and it was glorious. I sat back watching the sun dip below the horizon, my phone blissfully free of notifications. I had a cold drink in my hand, a playlist of my favorite songs playing in the background, and for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't worried about what my family thought or whether I had done the right thing. I had done the right thing for me, and that was enough. The silence stretched for a full week. No calls, no texts, nothing. I expected my parents to try one last desperate move, but for the first time, they seemed to realize I wasn't budging. Maybe the public embarrassment had finally sunk in. Maybe they were regrouping. Either way, wasn't about to get comfortable then. Just as I was settling into my new life, the next surprise arrived. Certified mail, a thick envelope with my parents' return address, the kind that never carries good news. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee, and one hand let her open, her in the other bracing for whatever nonsense was. Inside it was a legal notice. My parents were threatening to sue me. I had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. According to the document, they were claiming I had misled them into believing I was purchasing the home for the benefit of the family and had unjustly enriched myself at their expense. It was absurd. I had never made a single promise to anyone about giving my house away, but their desperation had reached new levels. The best part, they were demanding financial compensation for the emotional distress I had caused. Emily, that's right, she was so distraught over not getting a free house that they thought she deserved money. I did what any rational person would do, I laughed. Then I called my lawyer. The conversation was short. My lawyer barely held back his own amusement as he told me this case had zero chance of holding up in court. At best, it was a scare tactic at worst. Last-ditch effort to manipulate me into giving in. Either way, I wasn't worried, but I also wasn't about to let it slide. If they wanted to escalate things, I'd escalate them right back. I made a few more calls, one to my bank just to triple check everything was locked down, and another to a locksmith to reinforce my home security. Then I did the thing I knew would push them over the edge. Sent my parents a certified letter in return informing them that any further harassment would result in legal action. 2 days later, the phone calls resumed. First my mom, then my dad, then Emily. I ignored them all. They left voicemails. Some apologetic, others still trying to guilt trip. Me, my mom's was the best. She went from sobbing to furious within a single message, demanding to know how I could turn my back on my own family over something as small as a house. Small, the irony nearly knocked me over. If it was so small, why were they willing to go to court over it? Finally, on the third day, I picked up when my dad called. He skipped the pleasantries straight to business. They would drop everything if I just agreed to work something out with Emily. I told him there was nothing to work out. That was the last saint. He exploded, ranting about how selfish I was, how I had betrayed them, how no son of his would ever treat his family this way. It was the kind of speech I had heard a dozen times before, but this time I felt nothing. I let him talk. Then when he finally ran out of steam, I calmly told him I had nothing left to say. Wished him well. Told him I hoped they would move on, and hung up, and that was it. The legal threats dropped the guilt. Tripping gone, my parents finally seemed to understand that I wasn't giving in. And Emily, well, she went radio silent. Either she realized she wasn't getting anything from me, or she found another target to latch onto. For the first time in my life, I felt free. No more manipulation. No more obligations, just me. My house and a future that actually belonged to me. I had won the first few weeks of freedom were an adjustment. I had spent so long waiting for the next round of manipulation that it felt strange to wake up without dreading a passive-aggressive text or another family ambush. My house actually felt like a home now, not just a place I had to defend. For the first time, I could focus on myself. I got into a solid routine, waking up early, hitting the gym, cooking real meals instead of grabbing fast food on the go. I finally had the time and energy to enjoy the little things, like sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee and watching the world wake up. It was the kind of peace I never realized I needed. But of course, peace never lasts forever. One afternoon, while working from home, I heard a knock at the door. My gut told me exactly who it was. Before I even looked, sure enough, Emily. She stood on my porch, looking less like the sister I grew up with and more like a door-to salesperson on the last day of the quarter. The entitled confidence was gone, replaced by something that almost looked like desperation. Almost. I didn't let her in. Instead, I stepped outside, arms crossed, waiting for whatever script she had prepared. She started with small talk. Awkward, forced, like she was reading from a badly rehearsed script. Then came the real reason she was here. She had thought about everything and realized she had been a little unfair. She wasn't asking for a house anymore. She assured me just a place to stay, just for a little while. I nearly laughed. A little while, right? And then would I let her move in, and suddenly I'm paying her bills while she lounges on my couch complaining about how unfair life is. Not a chance I kept. My response simple: she had parents who had been over backward for her. Why not stay with them? That's when the real true slipped out. She wasn't welcome there anymore. Apparently, after everything that went down, our parents' reputation took a topsy. Balmy, so hit relatives who used to enable their behavior weren't so quick to take their side. Even some of Emily's friends had distanced themselves. Turns out when you go viral for trying to scam your own brother, people don't exactly want to be associated with you. Emily wasn't just looking for a place to crash. She was looking for an escape from the mess she had made. I didn't take the bait. I told her I wasn't interested in playing that role anymore. No hard feelings, but I was responsible for fixing problems she created. The moment those words left my mouth, her expression changed. The fake humility dropped, replaced with the same old bitterness. She called me selfish, said family should help each other. Just shrugged. She left in a huff, making a dramatic exit that might have worked when we were kids, but all I felt was relief. A few days later, I stopped by the mall to pick up a few things while waiting in line at a coffee shop. I heard a familiar voice. It was Emily talking loudly to someone at a nearby table. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when your sister's voice carries like a megaphone, it's hard not to. She was complaining loudly about how hard life was now, how she had to get this work a real job like a regular person. She went on about how exhausting it was, how she couldn't believe people did this every day. Meanwhile, the woman, she was talking to look like she was seconds away from reminding Emily that most of the population has been doing exactly that forever. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. It was too good. Instead of saying anything, I grabbed my coffee and walked past her table. She didn't even notice me, but as I stepped outside, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one dealing with Emily's drama. Someone else got to hear her monologue about life's injustices, and you know what? That was fine by me. Later that evening, I got a text from my mom, a last-ditch effort to guilt me into reconsidering something about how family sticks together and how she couldn't believe how cold I had become. I ignored it. They had spent years making it clear that I wasn't really part of their definition of family. Unless I was useful to them now, I finally understood something important. Wasn't cold, I was just done, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone.